this is what these dogs are like, and we want to help the people that choose to adopt them. They're not easy to place, but there are resources out there to help clients and to help breeders and people who have these puppies find them homes. Because a lot of the breeders don't want to place them. They don't want their name tagged onto anything that looks like this and has these issues. That's bad breeding. Yet they're willing to have them euthanized, and that is not acceptable.
Melissa, please tell me a bit about yourself. Introduce yourself and what you do and your background and all that good stuff.
Well, I am a veterinarian. I'm also a mom to human children, 3 who are in their 20s. And I have a husband, Warren, Piglet's favorite dad. I have had a household practice for 30 years. I have done and still do a fair number of in-home euthanasias and end-of-life care for people, for their dogs and cats. I have a nonprofit called Piglet International, Inc. that supports my Piglet work, meaning Piglet Mindset Educational Outreach Program to kids and teachers, teaching growth mindset, being positive, optimistic, empathetic, flexible, resilient, and perseverant, as well as inclusion, which we use our whole group of dogs along with Piglet as a model for inclusion, acceptance, empathy, and kindness. We also support dog rescues through Piglet's fundraising, and I have sold over 9,700 shirts and raised over $98,000 selling T-shirts.
Wonderful.
That we then donate a fairly big percentage to dog rescues that primarily focus on dogs with disabilities, as well as other related organizations with similar messaging to ours, which is being kind to animals and to all. And then have our social media pages as well.
Come on, let's go to bed.
Piglet is a deaf-blind pink, as you can see. He's got a pink tinge to him. Dachshund Chihuahua mix, who was rescued from a hoarding situation in Georgia in February of 2017. He was rescued by a friend of mine who has a rescue in Georgia called Colbert Veterinary Rescue Services. Dr. Gloria Andrews is the vet. I met her when we adopted that dog back there that you can see in the video there, Gina on the couch, 6 years before Piglet. So her group rescued Piglet, and then they were looking for a placement for him, and I agreed to foster him. He came up here in March of 2017. He is a very, very feisty, really positive dog despite his challenges, which are quite significant. He's deaf and blind as a result of Double Merle, Double Dapple breeding, which I know we'll talk about.
Hello, Debbie. Please take a moment to introduce yourself and what you do.
I've been a holistic dog trainer and wellness practitioner for about 30 years, maybe a little longer. One of my specialties is working with dogs that are both blind and deaf. And I really enjoy teaching my clients how to work with their dog that might have different abilities, most specifically to open up the lines of communication there, because if you have a dog that can't see you or can't hear you, sometimes you need to, communicate a little bit differently. I'm also the author of Through a Dark Silence, which is a guidebook for living with and teaching blind and deaf dogs. And I keep the White Dog blog, which is a blog that focuses on the same. So, I started learning dog training when I was very young, and I soon realized that there were some behavior concerns that just, we could manage them in the moment, but they tended to just keep creeping up and creeping up and creeping up, especially when I was working with a client, and maybe they weren't keeping up on everything every day, and the behavior just started to come back. And what I realized is that there's always a reason for that behavior. And so as a holistic practitioner and dog trainer, I look at all of the aspects of the animal's life, of their environment, the people that they live with, the exercise they get, the nutrition they get, what might be causing them some stress in their environment that we can get rid of. And oftentimes when you look at all of those things and you actually get to what the cause of the behavior is, the behavior just goes away. on its own. So I sort of take a look at the whole picture instead of just, we're going to train the dog not to do this, or we're going to train the dog to do this. There's a much bigger picture, and usually it's what happens in daily life.
Tell me about your dog, Vinny. He's a Double Merle.
So Vinny is 5 years old. He's a rough-coated collie, and he was born both blind and deaf. He is what's considered a Double Merle. There are some different terms for that. Homozygous Merle. In collies, sometimes they're called double dilutes. They might be called a double dapple in a dachshund. Basically, it means that both of Vinny's parents were Merle-colored, and so he inherited one of those Merle variants from each of his parents. So that's basically what we're getting at, and that can cause the issues with vision and hearing impairments.
If you could tell me about your name, about yourself, and your background in animals.
I don't have a background in animals per se, other than that I've had them since I was a child. So, we started out with a family pet, and then once I was able to, I had my own dogs, and my mom fosters, and I did work at a vet for 4 years. So I did learn a lot, as a tech. When I trained my family dog, I was supposedly the youngest one to do training. I think I was 13 or 14 at the time. Oh, cool. So, and they weren't, I guess, normally in that setting. They wanted adults, but my mom's like, it's your dog. So, and I did that, and training went really well. I've always been very good with training dogs. So yeah, then I started getting rescues. And then the next dog, and this is the most interesting one I got, was named Strider. I saw a picture, and I think most of us, when we are looking for a pet, or even not looking, we are drawn, just like people, to an appearance. And he was very unique looking. He was also a Sheltie. He was very large for their breed, but he was white. He was not pure white. He had a neat little patch and some on his ear. So he had some coloring, but I'd never seen one this white before. And I was like, oh, this is kind of weird. And then I looked him up, and they said something about him being a Double Merle or a double dilute Merle. I've never heard of this. I was like, okay. I think I knew what Merle was, the coloring. And that he had, he couldn't hear, so he was deaf. Yes. I was like, oh, okay, well, at first you're sort of well, how are you gonna do this? Generally, we train with verbal cues and stuff like that, but I was like, he's really sweet, let's meet him. He's a big goof. I ended up taking him home that day. Good boy. He was my boy. He was the loveliest dog. I had him for 12 and a half years.
At getting experience with him, the reason you went ahead and got Snow.
It was actually my husband's suggestion. He's like, well, why don't we there was another Sheltie on the same place we got him from. And he's like, well, why don't we get the same type of dog? Maybe they'll be able to relate well, and so he won't be lonely. So that is actually why we ended up getting Snow. Come on. Good girl. Good girl. She was in foster care for, I want to say 2 years, and she did fine there, but I'm guessing because she was deaf and blind, there wasn't demand for her.
He came to us, his litter had 4 puppies. 3 of the puppies were affected by the double dapple. And that means that in his case, there are 3 white dogs that have hearing and eye defects. One is deaf but can see, one is deaf and can see some but not well. And then there's Piglet, who's deaf and blind. And then there was 1 normal puppy.
Okay.
So the odds of, with double dapple breeding, when you take 2 dapple dogs and breed them together, 25% chance that each puppy will be affected, but that's not in a litter of 4. Each puppy had a chance of 25% being affected. And in his case, 3 out of 4 were affected. Okay. So 75% of the litter was affected. Anyway, when he came to us, he was very anxious. He couldn't see and hear. He was born in a garbage can apartment in Georgia where it was filthy, and they got evicted, and then they were living in a truck, and the dogs were in cages and all of this and that. But when he came here, screeching and screaming, running around all the time, it was distressful for us to watch him be in distress. So we really weren't planning to keep him. I offered to foster him just because I felt like I could be of help. But after a while, he wanted to connect. He needed to be shown how. So once he realized that we were trying to connect with him and he was becoming more familiar with the routine and what was going on here, the other dogs were very helpful to him. Susie, our old dog who we lost in April, is a little gray terrier mix. She would lay with him and we would call to her, Susie, come, we can't take it anymore. You have to go lay with him. And she would, and it was very comforting to him. So we were able to bring him into the family in a very natural way. It took a little time, but ultimately he did settle in and he learned that he didn't have to worry. Whatever in the world he was worrying about at any particular moment, he didn't need to anymore because he was going to be held, he was going to have a family, he was going to have activities, he would know what was going to happen most of the time, and he didn't have to worry about being fed. He had other dogs to play with him and he got to go places with me. And he had his favorite dad to lay on his lap and in his jacket and be snuggled. So all of those things happened and it took a few weeks. And then he finally just got into the hang of it and he joined the family in full swing. And he is a very active dog and he needs a lot of attention because he does not want to be alone. And since it's easy for him to be alone, not being able to see and hear, we do put in an extra effort to keep connected with him, and he demands that, let's just say. It's not like we have a choice.
What happened? Did you get left all alone? He did. He's upset about it.
So how can you tell if a dog is blind or deaf, or blind and deaf, whether they're double Merle or not?
It's tricky.
I bet it is.
So sometimes with a dog that's blind, sometimes they're born without eyes or their eyes are deformed in some way. So it might be a little easier to tell in that instance.
Yeah.
But some dogs have eyes that are, they look normal to us, but their vision may not be normal. So the dog might obviously bump into things, but a lot of them don't. And so if someone were to come to my house, it's very difficult for them to tell that my dogs are blind because they know their way around. They go up and down the stairs, they jump on and off the bed, they play with each other. So it can be really tricky for somebody to tell that a dog is, has a visual impairment. But some things you might see are them feeling with their feet when they're going up and down steps. They might tend to walk kind of with their shoulder to the front rather than their face because they don't want to run into something with their face. So but again, it's very subtle. And, dogs are so adaptable that sometimes it can be really hard to tell. If you have a dog and you think that they are either losing vision or say you adopt a dog and you think, oh, something's just not right. I wonder if they have a visual impairment. It's always best to seek out a veterinarian or even an ophthalmologist.
Is there a spectrum of blindness? Because I know for humans, there's like legally blind and then there's blind. You cannot see. So is this the same for dogs?
Yes. And so there's everything in between, maybe you just don't see very well at night. You can see pretty well the rest of the time. I mean, there's all kinds of variation all the way up to obviously complete blindness. And the same thing goes for deafness. And you can also have a dog that maybe has an impairment in one eye or in one ear. And it's even, I think, harder to tell that a dog has a hearing impairment. You can't tell by looking at their ears. Sometimes you can tell if you're making noises and they're just not paying attention. But we all know dogs. And we know that sometimes if there's a squirrel over there, right, we can be saying things and the dog is so focused on something else that, but some signs are, if your dog sleeps like really, really deeply and they don't hear you coming in when you get home from work, they don't hear the food being poured in the bowl in the other room, things that would be important to them. If they're not noticing those, that can kind of be a hint. Also, if they have a hearing impairment maybe in one ear and not the other, they may not be able to pinpoint where a sound is. So they could hear the sound, but they might not know where it was coming from. But I do have clients that are really surprised, to find out that their dog that they've lived with for several months is deaf and probably has been since they brought it home, because dogs are so good at just watching their environment and responding either to our movements or maybe the other dogs in the home. What I've learned from living with my dogs that are both blind and deaf, I mean, they surprise me every day with things that they know or they recognize happening in their environment, and it just blows me away. And I've been living with them here for, years and years.
People don't believe it all the time, but I promise you, she cannot hear and she cannot see. Good at fooling you, but yeah. She plays, she eats well, she sleeps like a log. We do training. Sit. Good girl. We do physical therapy with her because she's getting older and she responds really well to that. So I've trained her to do like little exercises on these balls. We were doing sniff training. She's amazing at that. So I can hide something within the room and I can step out, ask her to find it with a touch signal, and off she goes and she'll go find it. So she's a very powerful sense of smell. And the other thing, which I find remarkable, is I guess sense of touch or feeling. So say we slam the door gets closed, she'll feel that. She can feel my laugh. It's kind of loud, but she knows, and she's like, her head will go up. She's like, oh, guess what Mom's doing again. And it's amazing. Like, it's really quite phenomenal, because when people come over like, are you sure? I'm like, yes. She's been tested, I promise you. But like, she walks around her house, she knows where her bed is, she knows where her water is, she knows where she needs to go to get her food. I can tap her if she's having a little meltdown. I can tap her twice and she'll go to her bed and have a little relax. So yeah, she's doing great.
Did you want to tell me about any of your other dogs too?
Oh yeah, my first dog was a blind dog, so disabilities and disabled dogs is normal for me. It started with when I was 6 years old with a dog that was from a puppy mill.
Wow.
From Kansas. She came on a train to New York where there was a puppy store. And my parents didn't know, I certainly didn't know anything about puppy mills and pet stores then. It was a really long time ago. But she became blind 5-6 years old or so, she was blind.
Okay.
So that's how I started with this sort of inclination towards the ones with the issues. Wow. But then my vet school dog was diabetic that I adopted. Mm-hmm. And from her, I've had an assortment of dogs and birds with various disabilities. So when Piglet came, we were at six dogs and 4 birds. One bird was blind. One bird has a broken toe, so she couldn't be released. These are wild sparrows. Had a parakeet, also Lukita, who is splayed legs, so his legs stick straight out instead of underneath him. And the dogs were this group that we have now. So Gina is deaf in one ear. She's a Double Merle, and she has very, very significant anxiety. She can't place sounds, so when she can hear, she doesn't know where the sound is coming from. So if we're outside and she's looking that way in the yard and I'm over here and I call to her, she doesn't know where I am. So she'll start looking for me, and sometimes if she can't find me, she gets upset. She's a little, now she's 11 years old now, so she has an idea how things work. But I once had her in my car, the door was open and I was standing and talking to somebody. And Annie was a little puppy. She jumped out of the car into a parking lot while I was standing there talking to my friend, blocking the doorway. So she jumped out and I yelled to her, "Here," which is my emergency recall.
Here!
Gina heard me yell "here," and I wasn't standing exactly by the door because I was getting Annie. She heard "here," didn't see me, and took off like a bat out of hell across the parking lot, away from me towards a really busy road. I am now sprinting across the parking lot to get her, and thankfully she stopped to sniff some grass and I could get in front of her to call her over to me. So this crazy thing happened, and it wasn't because she was trying to run away.
Right.
This is the consequence of double Merle breeding, dog with hearing issue. And I'm really crazy careful with the dogs, especially her, knowing that can happen. So that happened, and it was a big, wake up call that we have to even be more careful with her. Here! And then the others have just an assortment of various anxiety issues. No one has any physical, congenital types of anything that they were born with.
Right.
They came with one thing or another, but they're a nice group now.
The very first blind and deaf dog that I worked with was a collie, and she wasn't mine. She was living at a kennel where I was working for the summer, and they had the same mindset of, she's never going to learn anything. It's not worth, she was 9 or 10 months old. She'd never walked on a leash. They hadn't taught her to be groomed, and she's a collie, so she's going to need to learn to be groomed. And I didn't know. I was a very, very young trainer at the time, and it never occurred to me that she couldn't learn. And so during my breaks, my lunch breaks, I would get her out. She'd eat lunch with me. I would teach her. She learned how to fetch a ball. She learned how to jump over a jump. She learned how to do steps. She learned all kinds of tricks. It was just, that was my first experience with working with a dog that was both blind and deaf, but it was also my first experience with a Double Merle.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't even know at the time what a Double Merle was.
Right.
And that's kind of started my mission to find out more. At the time, I just kind of thought it was a fluke. And then I really started to realize that, no, this is something that, a lot of people back then, these dogs weren't allowed to live. They were like the dirty secret.
Yeah.
And if a breeder had one, nobody ever knew because they were, disposed of rather quickly after birth. But so that was the girl that started it all for me. And the inspiration for my book was Treasure. And Treasure came to me. She was about 4 years old. She'd been basically abandoned, and then she was rescued and taken to the Humane Society shelter. She was adopted. She was then sent to Sheltie Rescue. So she had a lot of tossing around. And when she came to me, it was very quickly apparent that she was just very sweet and could be a therapy dog. So we did our training and our evaluation, and she was an amazing therapy dog. In the course of her therapy career, she alerted me to various people's medical conditions. So when we were on a visit with someone that we knew very well, we had been visiting her for probably a month and a half, and Treasure would lay on her in her recliner while we visited, in an hour and a half. And suddenly Treasure started pawing at her chest and kind of trying to lick her.
Right.
And she wasn't usually a licker at all. She would just kind of lay there and be sweet. And at first we didn't really realize what was going on. And then the person had a seizure. At the first time, obviously it was a little stressful, but we went and got the nurse, and they took care of her, but they didn't really believe that, she'd had a seizure because it was already kind of over by that point. So the next time that we visited and I saw that behavior, I just kind of excused myself. Treasure needs to go to the bathroom. And I went out and got the nurse, and they were able to, be there and see it, and actually then get her the medical care that she needed to prevent her from having more. But this is really, really amazing.
He could see, but I don't think it was great, because there was this moment we had, and it actually was very terrifying, because normally he'd follow me around. I could actually have him off leash, no problem. Yeah. But we were in the guild and we're walking along, and I guess he got a little further behind. And so when I was motioning for him to come, he didn't recognize me. I was too far away. So I was like, oh my God, because he just went the other direction and tore off. And I'm like, oh, guess what? We're never doing it again. Like, never. So I caught him and everything. And once I got closer, he recognized me. But it dawned on me at that point, I guess I'd had him for a few years, so maybe it had gotten worse. But his distance wasn't great. His nighttime vision, I'm not so sure, because he would get scared at things like bushes and stuff, which was a little, maybe that's normal, but I wasn't sure. So that was, his eyesight might not have been great.
Right.
But like he had it enough to function in whatever manner he wanted to. But so you never really know until you know, which was that moment where I was like, oh my God, and we're never going off leash again.
To clarify about double merles or double dapples, which and that kind of thing, that is not breed specific, right? That is because of color. So
Merle is a color pattern.
Yeah.
And it is called so it's called Merle in the herding breeds. So it can be Aussies, Border Collies, Shelties and Collies, Catahoulas, mixes. Anything that has a Dachshund mix in them, in Chihuahuas too, it's called Dapple. It's the same genetics. It's just called something different by the breed. Harlequin Great Danes. Bulldogs are Merle now because something else was bred in. Pure bulldogs do not have merling. The problem is that it's nice to mix other things in to the breeds because it dilutes some of the health issues. However, bringing Merle in has now introduced a new problem because when you breed two Merle bulldogs, you're going to increase the chance of double Merle, which is linked to ear and eye defects. Right. So now we have a new problem. There's nothing great about having Merle in a new breed. The other problem is that there are some dogs that it's hard to detect the Merle. It might just be one little speck in the eye or a tiny little light coloring on a leg or on the side. So if you are really truly going to breed dogs and you've got a Merle dog, you should genetic test the dogs to make sure that you're not breeding two Merles, because that is detected in genetic testing. Merle coloring is fine as long as you don't breed to another dog that has Merle coloring.
Will a double Merle dog always end up with health issues, blindness, deafness, or anything like that?
You know, there's some controversy there. Some people say that double Merles are not going to be healthy. They're not going to lead, live a long life. That hasn't been my experience. Okay. So all of the ones that I've dealt with have been relatively healthy, have lived, a long life. Vinny does have some allergies. I don't think that that's related to him being a double Merle. There are lots of other dogs that have allergies. But what we need to look at is sometimes dogs that are being born as double Merles are not being bred particularly well. So if they come from a situation where the person breeding the litter is not doing genetic testing or is not paying attention and is breeding dogs that have allergies or have heart conditions or have seizures, these kinds of things, likely those are going to be passed on to the puppies, whether they were double Merle or not. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that double Merles it's totally preventable.
Yes.
Right? So it can only happen if two dogs pass on that Merle. And actually I usually say it's a Merle gene, but it's not, it's an allele. So it's a variant of the gene. Merle acts on the color gene of the dog. So if you just don't breed two Merles together, you can't have a double Merle. And actually there are some really cool studies now and genetic tests that can be done on dogs that are Merle. Yes. So that you can see the length of that allele. The research has been done about, hey, if you test this dog and it has this length, you should make sure not to breed it to a dog that has this length. So, breeders that are really on top of things and are breeding any breed that has Merle in it, they have these tests now that are available to them. And I just think that's amazing. And hopefully it will go a long way towards, preventing more double Merles from being born. I love mine. I love him dearly, but he didn't have to be born this way. He could have been born able to see and hear.
Picking at his own tree.
Maybe you get a little extra satisfaction from saving something that a lot of people really want to euthanize for whatever the reason. Same with my dog, Piglet. I know people would have brought this dog in, and there are a lot of veterinarians that would have just put him to sleep, because what kind of quality of life can a deaf and blind dog have? So for me, then I come out to social media pages at vet conferences and I say, this is what these dogs are like, and we want to help the people that choose to adopt them. They're not easy to place, but there are resources out there to help clients and to help breeders and people who have these puppies find them homes. Because a lot of the breeders don't want to place them. They don't want their name tagged onto anything that looks like this and has these issues. That's bad breeding. Yet they're willing to have them euthanized. And that is not acceptable in many cases. There are some, obviously, that are destined to have a very poor quality of life. And of course, we do what's humane for them, but they're not all.
No.
It's because they have a disability and a congenital defect. And one of the things that I do is I give presentations to veterinarians about animals with disabilities, pets with disabilities, and why vets need to be supportive of people who want to adopt, care for, rescue these kinds of dogs. They don't want to euthanize them right from the start, knowing that they're not going to have a very long life. They want to give them a chance. They want to care for each as an individual, and they do. Veterinarians can help, and they don't want to hear you should euthanize that puppy. So my talks talk about different disabilities, showing examples of different individual dogs and cats also, and then there's a smattering of some other animals. There are dogs that are paralyzed, that their bladders need to be expressed, bowels need to be expressed. Some of those dogs, the people know they're going to get infections in their urinary tract. They're not going to live a full life, no matter what they do. They keep them anyway as long as they can, and those dogs do very well. There are some cats as well that I know of, blind cats, deaf cats, cats with, no back legs, and whatever other disabilities you can find. How do you take in a dog that is going to live for 6 more hours or 3 weeks or just a few years, and they want to help those dogs. They value each life, and that's why they do it. So vets also need to respect these people and care for their dogs, do whatever they can to keep the quality of life good. And when it's deteriorating, these dogs deteriorate, or cats, then it's time to euthanize humanely.
There are still a lot of dogs that are, they're given to shelters, they're given to rescues, they're dumped by the side of the road when someone realizes that they have a visual or a hearing impairment, and they think that they're kind of useless or helpless. But with Vinny and his sister, when they were very, very young, the people that had the dogs found out that the two of them were blind and deaf. They thought that the best thing to do was to have them euthanized because they wouldn't have a quality of life.
Right.
And thankfully, someone at the vet's office knew differently and knew of me and gave me a call. But they were very surprised to meet Vinny 6 months later.
Yeah.
And to see that he knew how to walk on a leash, he played with toys, he was house trained, he knew how to shake hands. It just was something that they hadn't been aware of. And I think a lot of people kind of feel that way. I think that we think of ourselves and we think, oh my gosh, if I, lost my vision and if I lost my hearing, like I wouldn't want to live anymore and how horrible it would be. But dogs don't have the same perspective that we do. And they do adapt very quickly.
Yeah.
And in Vinny's case, he never knew what it was like to see or hear. So for him, he's just a normal dog. So Vinny lives a very full, happy life. He travels with me. He stays in hotels. He goes to community events and dog shows. He's a therapy dog. So he does a lot of the same kinds of things that other dogs do. He likes to play with toys. He sleeps on my bed. He wrestles with the other dogs, likes to go for walks or rides in the car. I think the biggest thing is that his safety, because obviously he can't see. He's a very happy, outgoing dog. He's very confident. And so sometimes he will take off into a new situation with a lot of gusto. And I need to be careful that he is safe.
The deaf and blind dogs have to be in contact in order to communicate with them. So that creates an issue. We don't let them off of a leash most of the time unless they're in a fenced area. But so his quality of life is exceptional. He's one of the happiest dogs that we know. And I say with my husband all the time, if he could see and hear, he would not be any happier. He is a very, very happy dog. His quality of life is exceptional. Certainly, there are a lot of people and animals who would be very happy to live his life, quality-wise. But would he rather not be deaf and blind? Probably. He would be able to see things that he can't, and he would be able to hear, where people are and what we're saying to him. We wouldn't have to be touching him, but he sleeps in bed with me. He goes to work with me. He goes to visit schools. He has a routine when he goes there. He loves to have his cookies. He likes to have his other dogs with him doing his tricks. We call it the Piglet show. He likes to pose for pictures in front of people. He likes to sit there like he's, that. And he knows that he's that. And he poses like a person or an individual, a dog, who knows that they have some stature. He's not snotty and arrogant, but he definitely has some pride in himself. He has confidence. He came with confidence, which was one of the remarkable things about him when he was a tiny little baby running around screaming. He was also a very confident dog. So it was just a matter of time before he figured out where he needed to be within his world.
Especially if you're born with these differences, they don't know any different. According to them, they're functioning exactly how they're supposed to, having a life that they enjoy. So it's really hard for me to look at that and be like, I have to correct a lot of people. They'll get that look on their face like, oh, that's so sad. And I'm like, no. And I have to reinforce, it's not sad. She is a princess. She is spoiled, rotten. She is happy. Sure, she can't see things, but she doesn't know any different. She can't hear things, but she doesn't know any different. She's really happy.
First of all, how do you train a deaf dog?
So a deaf dog is going to be very attracted visually to everything in their environment to gather information. And so sometimes it can be difficult to keep their attention, right? So if they see something happen, they're automatically going to go visually looking towards it. And so one of the first things I do is I teach a deaf dog to check in with me regularly and automatically. So I don't have to be nagging him all the time. Hey, pay attention to me. So what that looks like is he might be sniffing over here for a few seconds. He's just going to peek in at me, see what I'm doing, right? And that gives me a chance, because I know he's going to peek in, that gives me a chance to be ready and either give him a hand signal, what I want him to do instead, or just kind of give him a, hey, go back to what you were doing kind of thing. But in an emergency, if I know he's going to check in with me, I have a way to communicate with him. So that's one of the first things that I teach. I also teach that if they're touched suddenly or they're startled by something, that it's a good thing. So they don't have to be scared. They don't have to run away. They don't have to feel like they might want to turn and snap at me. So I teach them any kind of touch is a good thing. I teach them that being woken up is a good thing. Anything that surprises them or startles them, I try to put something positive in there right away to teach them, it's not a horrible thing. If something startles you, just turn around and look at it and it's okay. And I use a lot of, obviously, hand signals and body language, facial expressions. They really learn to read your facial expressions. One of my deaf dogs, if I even raised my eyebrow, she knew something was up.
Oh, that's funny.
She made me a better trainer because I really learned to pay attention to my subtle body language.
Now, how about training a blind dog?
So blind dogs, I try to teach the same thing about a sudden touch or a startle. It's a good thing because they can't see your hand coming towards them. They can't see, maybe something that was falling, a pillow off the couch or something. So I want to really boost their confidence in that, if something happens, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. I can teach them verbal cues, just like, I would teach my other dogs that can see and hear normally. You can use different sounds. So you might put a wind chime, by your back door in the yard so that your dog knows the direction to come back towards the house. Some people use a little cat water fountain.
Okay.
For their dogs, so the water keeps running,
Yep.
so that their dog can find, the water bowl easily, those kinds of things. I teach words that mean different things. So stop is an important one, because if your dog's going to run into something or step off of the edge of the pool or, whatever, you want to be able to say stop, and have them just stop until you can tell them what else to do.
Right.
Same thing with steps. Step up or step down.
Okay.
So cues for things that they would need, in their daily life. You can certainly teach them a verbal cue for something that they might startle them, or they might run into something.
What about a dog that is both deaf and blind, like a Double Merle can be sometimes?
Yeah, like Vinny.
Yeah, like Vinny.
I teach Vinny just using touch cues. So any cue that I would give verbally or with a hand signal, I can give the same cue with a touch. Okay. So I'm just going to touch Vinny in different ways and in different places of his body, and those have come to mean different things for him. So he will rest his chin in my hand, for instance, and that's a wait cue for him, and I can examine his eyes or give him eye drops while his head is in my hand. When I'm finished, I just give him 2 little taps with my finger on the side of his chin, and he knows that we're done. 2 taps on his front foot, he lays down. A touch on the top of his tail, at his bum there, he knows to sit.
Okay.
So he knows a whole lot of different behaviors, all on touch cue. I always use positive reinforcement, obviously, with all of my dogs. So in the beginning, I do some luring with food if I need to get a certain behavior, and then I add the cue to it.
Right.
And I would do that with a dog that was blind or a dog that was deaf also. And again, safety comes into everything that I would be teaching to a dog that's blind or deaf. So I would teach them how to do steps safely. I would teach them how to get on and off the bed safely, in and out of the car.
All right.
And then I also do the touch training. So if something touches you, it's a good thing. If someone wakes you up, it's a good thing.
Susan?
For anybody who's feeling bad for him, even when we do our group tricks, I have them all sit in a row and I call the other dogs and I leave him to last.
Annie.
Because it's good for him to do his tricks and to listen, in quotes, listen to his signals. I give him the tap signal to wait, and he knows he's going to wait, and everyone might walk past him. I might call him sooner.
We have to get Piglet. Piglet, come on. There he goes.
But he's doing the tricks with everybody else, and he enjoys it. Everyone feels bad for him because everyone else got called, and now he's sitting there waiting by himself. Well, it's fine. That's the way he's doing the trick. So there's nothing to feel bad about. He's just doing it. He's perfectly happy, and happy is good quality of life. So Piglet is a dog that no one should feel sorry for. I wrote a little article, Don't Feel Sorry for Piglet, the deafblind pink puppy. Look at him. He has fans all around the world. How many dogs get to have that? And a lot of people say, well, I don't know why, what's so special about him? Why do so many people love him? Well, look at him.
Okay, sit down in there. Good girl. When I got Snow, and prior to Snow Strider, there was not a lot of resources out that I was aware of. So I didn't know where to start. I think someone in the rescue referred me to Deb, who's in the States, and she helped me so much just with the way you can train them. If you know you're going to get a blind and deaf dog, get some books before you do this. Talk to someone who has one, because now you can find us. I was one of the first people who followed Piglet. So I was following him and his mom and noticed the same behaviors that Snow had. And I'm like, I felt better. I was like, oh, okay, I'm not doing anything wrong. Everything's fine. She's like Piglet, except larger, fluffier. But like same deal. She maps her stuff. She does all the exact same things. It was a relief to see like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. She's doing the exact same behaviors. It's great. Have that base of people to talk to.
Yeah.
Once I talked to Deb, I felt so much better. And then I talked to Piglet's mom a couple of times about stuff, and I was just like, oh, okay. You can do anything you want with a deafblind dog that you can do with a regular dog, except maybe let them off leash. But other than that, they do everything exactly the same.
Double Merle just happens to be a big issue, that's important to me. And so Vinny and I go out and we do education, we do tables at events, we do demonstrations to try to let people know that just because he's blind and deaf, he's still a dog. And, he loves all the things that dogs love. And if they're willing to open up their hearts and their homes, that there are lots of these dogs out there that need homes and could be a really great family member. If you think that you can give a home to one of these special dogs, I really just encourage people to reach out and to learn more. And I always say they're a dog first.
Yeah.
Right? So Vinny he's completely blind and deaf, and he's still a dog first. He likes the things that dogs like to do. He likes to dig, he likes to smell, he likes to roll in things. If you think that you might want to have a dog, think about what kind of dog you might want to have. Think about the size, think about the activity level, the breed, or the mixes of breeds and what they were intended to do. If you get a collie or you get a border collie, they're going to want to work, whether they can see and hear or not. They're going to want a job. They're going to want to be kept busy. They're going to need a lot of exercise. Think about the grooming needs. Vinny needs a lot of grooming. He sheds a lot.
Yep.
But, you have to think about all those things before you just say, oh, I'm going to go and give a home to one of these dogs. And then after all of that, learn as much as you can about whatever type of impairment and adaptations, you're looking at. So if it's a blind dog, learn about how to set up your home safely. Learn about, teaching that touch is a good thing. Learn as much as you can. And then always talk to whoever has the dog now. Who's taking care of the dog now, whether it's a shelter, whether it's a rescue, whether it's a private home, whether it's a breeder. Talk to them about how do you communicate with the dog? What kind of adaptations do you give to your environment, or how do you do things in your day-to-day routine? Are they different? What do I need to learn? And make sure that you feel comfortable with it before you just jump in. There's a lot of great resources out there for new adopters, and there's Facebook pages, there's classes, there's webinars, there's blogs, there's books, there's people that you can reach out to that would be happy to help you. So please, if you think that it's something that you can do, look into it. There's a lot of great dogs out there.
I was hoping you could go a little deeper into what it is you guys do, the message you're spreading, and, well, how this helps humans and animals.
Piglet has his social media pages. Piglet's Facebook page became quite popular pretty quickly after we decided to adopt him. I got him a dodo video because his rescue story was one of those kinds of stories that the dodo and other media channels like to use, because he came from a horrible place. He's profoundly disabled, and now he was inspiring people right from the beginning to get up in the morning in a more positive way and maybe think about their issues in a little different light. But also, I was raising money for dog rescues using Piglet merchandise. And I took all the money and I donated it to the rescue that rescued Piglet, and then some others that I was familiar with and had done work with. So I was posting on various rescue sites and other people's pages when I was trying to find a home for Piglet. And I then got a lot of those people onto Piglet's page, which I had created even before adopting him. So Piglet the Deafblind Pink Puppy is the name of his Facebook page. And a teacher posted a comment on one of the posts saying she couldn't wait to show Piglet's videos to her students. So I said, oh, I'll make them a video of their own. And this is how Piglet Mindset got started. And this is in our book. The whole story is in the book. Everything you want to know, more than what's on Instagram, more than I'm going to say right now, is all in that book. And it's a very nice, feel-good read, transformative for many. They send me notes telling me that they're crying through the whole book. So it's a very nice book with a very nice message from Piglet. And then also about my life as a veterinarian, our family, and, caring for animals in different ways and different types of community service. And there's something in there for everybody. So Piglet Mindset got started in a classroom in Plainville, Massachusetts. We met online, we collaborated, and now we have a program, which went over very, very well with the students. Ultimately, the program has expanded and it's reaching thousands of kids with many, many teachers across the country in the US. And I don't know how many people out of the country use it, but I know there are some. Also, we have Piglet's Inclusion Pack, this is the picture on the back, and then this is the card, which has basically the definition of Piglet Mindset. And the kids agree to face challenges with a positive attitude, accept others for who they are, include others despite their differences, show empathy and compassion towards others, and always be kind and considerate to all. And then we will make virtual or in-person visits depending on the situation. Kids love it. They ask amazing questions. They learn all about a disabled dog that they can then integrate into their approach to people with disabilities, peers, and also just people that need extra friendship, extra support at certain times in the playground when they're on a team or playing music or whatever they're doing. We talk about, what are you going to do? How are you going to have Piglet Mindset? And I ask them that question. Creative teachers bring it into their classroom and use it, and everybody who uses it loves it because the kids love it and it's engaging to the kids. And animals, of course, we all know, are one of the best ways to teach anything to kids. And that goes for adults also, where they're on our pages. People from all around the world come onto our pages, and they're actually learning from Piglet as well. I don't know what it is about him because, and people that are disabled don't want to be congratulated for being able to walk up the stairs.
No.
And neither does Piglet. He doesn't know that we're all excited because he learned to walk up the stairs. Because he's a dog, we can actually use him as an example for showing what a deaf and blind dog can do. People that are deaf and blind don't want to be, on display.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of them are very willing to describe what it's like because people want to know what it's like to be disabled in many different ways. So for him, that is what empathy is, that, you want to know what it's like to be him so then you can do something, not just, I'm curious. Most people really do want to know and they really want to understand because they want to be extra kind or they want to be supportive, but not in a patronizing way. Part of his pull is that he's really a very funny dog and he's really adorable. So when he's doing all these crazy things, when he bumps into something and then he just bounces and moves on, it really is extra cute and extra engaging so that people can understand he's got a disability and he's moving on with his life and they should do the same.
Yes, you were caught in the act. Yes, you were caught.
Piglet is included by our group of dogs, but the group of dogs also includes each other. They're not just about, oh, here's a great group of dogs that pulled Piglet in. They were already accepting each other. And I point this out to the kids. They're all different, our dogs. They're different colors, different sizes, different ages, different hair coat, different breed mixes, different personalities. And they all like to do things a little bit differently, but when they get together, they love to do things together. So they are accepting each other and including each other. And then they pull Piglet in and he accepts them as well, most of the time. I tell him, you're in an inclusion pack, behave yourself, Because Piglet would like to be the only dog wherever he goes.
You should never not consider a dog because they're blind or deaf, because honestly, they're great. They're great. They really are.
In this day and age, with all of the information that's out there, it's on the internet, it's very easy for people to access. There's really no excuse for them not to know. And now with this Merle testing that's out there, that's a phenomenal resource. And, you know, if you were going to be a breeder and you had a dog that was Merle and you got this test done, you know, you could very easily then communicate to other breeders who wanted to breed, you know, either to your dog or from your dog about, hey, you need to get this testing done. We need to make sure that this is going to be safe. There's really no reason to bring puppies into the world that, you know, going into it have a chance of being born with impairments. There are so many dogs out there right now, so many double Merles that need homes. Yeah. And some of them are living years in rescues because there's not enough adopters out there for them.
Yeah.
Most of us who have a double Merle will adopt another one and another one and another one, but there's only so many we can have, you know, in our homes. And there are rescues being inundated with puppies all the time. And it's just, there's no need for it. You know, it is something that can be totally prevented. So the more we can educate and help people to understand that this is a possibility and this could happen if they breed two Merles together, I think that will go a long way too. Now, so many people are breeding for color. So many people are breeding mixed breeds. So we're ending up with the Merle color in all kinds of doodles and things that some of those breeders may not be aware that this can be an issue. So.
One of the things that I teach the kids, you know, he uses what he has, and that is the lesson. So when I have the kids do the activities, I show them, they put a blindfold on, and I made a maze, follow it with their fingers through. And what I didn't know was going to happen, didn't expect, was the first kids that did it, they said, oh, I don't even need to think about this anymore because I have it memorized. And I said, well, that's the whole point of the lesson. Piglet memorizes different places using his sense of touch on the ground, and then of course his sense of smell. You know, he knows which dog is which by the way that they smell. He can't see them, and he knows them by their breath. And when he meets people, he smells their breath. And once he's met someone, he knows them and he stores it away. And when he meets them again, he knows them. Right. So Piglet is using a whole different set of senses and stimulation, processing things differently, but the end result is that he's within his world and he's functioning very, very well. And it's a nice lesson for people to see that even if you're not good at something, whether it's math or sports or whatever it is, you can use other skills to improve that and do other things that contribute to your happy quality of life. And I look at him, I think, you know, where he came from, that he could reach this many people, and with this kind of positivity, there's nothing like it, really.